Wait, do people not know what an OVA is? Okay, for those in the back, OVA stands for Original Video Animation. It always refers to anime. It's the anime that are too weird, too sexual, too violent, or just didn't have the budget for a TV broadcast. Because they didn't have to abide by TV guidelines, they could be as strange or experimental as they wanted. You'll watch one and it's a masterpiece, then another will be truly awful. They're a mystery box with no quality limits. Over the past few months, we have been graciously invited onto the OVA Hell podcast. Watching a strange anime every month has been a lot of fun, so in honor of its 1-year anniversary, we thought it would be fun to talk about all the OVAs that have appeared on the podcast. So join us as we descend into OVA Hell.
Like a flash, the invincible slayer Dick Saucer is here!
Dragon Half is a manga by Ryusuke Mita, with a 1993 OVA by Production IG. Ryusuke is married to the mangaka for Heat Guy J, Chiaki Ogashima, but that's not an OVA, so has no place in this video. Dragon Half stars Mink, a half-dragon, half-human. A dragon half. This 2-episode comedy is all over the place, but the main driver of the story is Mink's love for the pop star Dick Saucer. Fantastic name, by the way, and the king's repeated plots to kill her. The world the characters inhabit is heavily inspired by JRPGs of the time. The outfits look like they're pulled right out of early Dragon Quest. Like, look at the pauldrons here, or how about the evil advisor character with his classic robes? In episode 1, this guy enters with a bucket of dry ice for dramatic effect and then has to carry it away when he leaves. That set my expectations so well, it knows what it wants to be. No characters truly get hurt even when they get stabbed, dropped into lava, stabbed in the face, or exploded. Except this dragon, who Mink eats in a shocking display of cannibalism. I had a lot of fun with Dragon Half. We both laughed out loud multiple times. Its largely friendly, chaotic world reminds me a lot of early Dragon Ball or something like Ruin Explorers. Doesn't feel like anything really bad will happen, so just sit back and enjoy the hijinks. It would almost feel like it's intended for a younger audience, if not for the characters wearing bikini armor, and the singular shot of bare nipples. The 90s were a better time. Unfortunately, as is the fate of OVAs, the 2 episodes didn't really do great, and so the production of a further 2 was scrapped. Even without this, the plot is very chaotic, with the 2nd episode referencing that the first cut out plot points and thus makes no sense now. It's very tongue-in-cheek in that way.
Gunsmith Cats is a manga by Konichi Sonoda. The anime adaptation was directed by Takeshi Mori at OLM team Koitabashi. Fun Konichi Sonoda fact: he's currently the 19th head of his family's wagashi confectionery shop. What a career progression. The Gunsmith Cats OVA released in 3 parts across 1995 and 1996. It was an OVA in every sense of the word, being an entirely original story with only allusions to the manga. Because of this, it's able to be enjoyed as its own thing. Which we did. Both the anime and manga are set in Chicago, and both the main characters are American. The aesthetic is very American, but I don't know enough about Chicago to know if it's accurate to that. The production did take location scouting trips, but also a critic said it seemed generically American and not like Chicago. This was from the British manga magazine Manga Mania, who published Gunsmith Cats in the UK, specifically Manga Publishing, who briefly ruined the general UK understanding of anime by licensing all of their anime under the title of Manga Video, and led to me getting in an argument with my school librarian when I was 12 or so. They're defunct now and became the UK and Ireland branch of Crunchyroll. Bastards. Anyway, back to Gunsmith Cats. They aren't even cats, what's up with that?
What?
The Gunsmith Cats in the title actually refers to the gun shop the 2 protagonists run, with their side gig as bounty hunters being the main action in the show. Although, I would watch them just run a gun shop, to be honest. It's an action-packed 3 episodes with protagonist Raleigh, a gunslinger, and Minnie, the explosives expert. The plot of the OVA centers around the pair being blackmailed by the ATF into helping foil an illegal gun smuggling operation. I enjoyed it quite a lot. It feels like a small story as part of a much larger narrative, and could slot into almost anywhere in the manga. Gunsmith Cats does have its fair share of controversy, with Minnie in particular being 17 or 18 depending on translator and some manga retconning. She's a former prostitute and hormonally stunted from taking Chinese herbal medicine to keep a young body to appeal to her then boyfriend who was 20 years older. In the English release, she has a hormonal disorder she is attempting to treat with the medicine. I do not like that change. The original is a messed up backstory, but this is not a nice world. Minnie's erratic, upbeat personality makes a lot of sense to a girl who is restricted and abused. She has a distinct lack of care towards causing harm to herself and others that would feel more flat if she was just a normal girl. It also contrasts well with Raleigh, who is 19 and trying to seem more mature and businesslike. She's illegally running the shop. The law dictates you have to be at least 21 to sell guns, so there is a reason for her to overcompensate. In the manga, we find out her dad left to hunt down her mother's killers and she took up running Gunsmith Cat. A good backstory for a 19-year-old trying to act more adult than she actually is. The tone is very similar to Black Lagoon or Cowboy Bebop, so if you liked those, then all 3 episodes of Gunsmith Cats will only take an hour of your time. Check it out!
Twinkle Nora Rock Me is the sequel to the Nora OVA, but it's so incoherent that it functions as a standalone episode. Loosely based on the manga Nora no Hakubune by Satomi Mikuriya, with about as much animation. Filmlink International created something interesting. There is very little information on this OVA despite it having a behind the scenes video, probably because it spends most of its time depicting the director, Satomi Mikuriya, smoking indoors, chasing down a woman on his motorbike, getting her to cosplay Nora, and then running around town before exploding in a ball of smoke and pyrotechnics. Wait, where have I heard that name before? Oh! It's actually an incredibly fun 15 minutes, but it doesn't feel earned with how disappointing the actual anime is. Which is a shame because the first OVA seems to be slightly more competent. There is no way this was deliberately awful, but the line, "I wanted Mr. Mikuriya to be the director and run it like a one-man show," might have had something to do with it. Especially since it was his manga. I would legitimately believe that he was the sole animator as well. His manga and anime careers ran roughly parallel, but Nora was the only one he did so much for. The way he talks in the behind the scenes doesn't feel like it though. It's like he was a stranger to her before being asked to script, direct, storyboard, and design this OVA. The OVA itself follows a psychic called Nora with erratic morals as she goofs around on planet Dazzle to play bounty hunter. Nora wants to learn more about her powers, but clearly her and the production team had no idea what was going on. Nora can move rocks, create illusions, break illusions, and stop a man's heart with a wink. She befriends a townsman called Max who dreams big of being a dancer and encourages him to dance with her at a beautiful 2 frames per minute. She then defeats an evil bandit and saves the day, ending with a dance scene. In some respects, I'm glad it was made. I think we could do with more projects on tiny budgets that actually make it to release. The low frame rate was pretty funny at times and the main song is pretty catchy, so like 10 out of 10.
Appleseed is a manga by Masamune Shirow, also known as the creator of Ghost in the Shell. The 1988 adaptation that we watched was produced by Gainax and takes the story in its own very different direction. This was only the second full-length movie Gainax had worked on as a studio, but the director Kazuyoshi Katayama was well versed with storyboarding and directing, with almost a decade in the industry by this point. You can really feel it with the dynamic action scenes and visually compelling composition. It was, however, his first time writing the script and screenplay of a large project, and that's where the flaws in Appleseed lie. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. What even is Appleseed? I certainly didn't know going in. Appleseed is a cyberpunk story set in an isolated utopian city called Olympus that was established after World War III. This is presented as a massive block of text crawling across the screen. Not always the greatest method of conveying information, but if there were production constraints, it's a pretty good way to front-load some of the setting. The story follows Briareos, a cyborg, and Junan, a human, as they work as police officers protecting the citizens of Olympus, the biodroids. In this OVA, they have to foil a terrorist plot to disable the city so it can't expand and put power back into the hands of humans. As expected from a setting where the city is called Olympus, there are a lot of Greek mythology references. However, if you watch the English dub or watch this video, you may have missed them entirely due to the absolute massacre of the names. One of the characters is named Charon, but it is pronounced Karen.
I'm Karen.
Karen Mouserus?
In the OVA. Briareos' surname is Briareos' surname is Hecaton Kyries, who were giants with 100 hands, so I assume his first name is referencing Briareos with a U. We also have Nike, Gaia, and Athena. Junan is a Scottish name, and there are a few characters with Japanese names. It gives that classic cyberpunk pancultural vibe, especially since a lot of the human characters were imported into Olympus from the outside devastation. The best thing about this OVA is the characters. The dynamic between the two leads is infectiously fun, and maybe even romantic. Not that either would admit to it. They are both effortlessly cool and mostly good at their jobs. The antagonist Charon is also really compelling. The push and pull of morally grey ideology is really well done. It's a lot like Dragon and Garp in One Piece or Lelouch and Suzaku from Code Geass. One side wants to work from within the system to improve things, and the other wants to break it down from the outside and start anew. You really do end up sympathising with him. I was fully on board for him to get some kind of revenge against the system, even if the cost was too high for it to be a moral victory. But speaking of his master plan, without spoiling too much, it was rough. The last third of the movie felt comparatively very rushed. It still looked great, but it felt like the story was missing key plot elements. Characters would get accused of being terrorists, and then be trusted again much too quickly. There's one scene where Briareos notices something, and the two spring into action. Only for in the next scene, the rest of the police seem to also know the information with no communication. Or just the way the world functioned felt like a plot device and not that well thought out. It just became startlingly clear I was watching a movie. Its biggest strength is also its biggest weakness. It was slow and deliberate about letting us sit in the minutiae of the world in the first half. Slow scenes in bars or doing grunt police work sold me on the world. The time it took to do that, however, was likely why the ending sucked as much as it did. Even the montage in the middle felt more an of-its-time aesthetic decision than a time-saving measure. So when all that skill suddenly evaporated, it left me disappointed overall. Maybe I might read the manga or watch the other adaptations. The world is cool, and I want to see its promise delivered on by someone who's a bit more skilled at storytelling, like Masamune Shirow. Other people have derided Appleseed 1988 for its poor pacing and low-quality animation. But those people are insane and not to be listened to. Maybe it was coming off the back of Twinkle Nora Rock Me, but the animation is really good, and the pacing is good for those first few chunks. I could absolutely recommend watching this, even if it was one of the more conflicting OVAs so far.
Cybervenus Fei Fei is a very fascinating look into the world of 3D animation in the late 90s and early 2000s. Initially conceived as a personal project, Fei Fei went on to be used as the poster girl for Shade, the 3D modeling software she was made in. Art books were produced and the assets to make her were for sale. A 2-volume OVA was released in November 2001 and involves various shorts that are fully CG. Some of these consist of cogs, hoverboards, water, and the digital world. These are okay, but it's the final short, when Fei Fei gets to interact with the real world, that her surreal power truly shines, placing Fei Fei in real-life settings like Rome, Venice, and a tropical island. I had low hopes going into this one since 3D animation can be pretty hard to make look good, and the reviews are pretty low, but it was actually very technically impressive. This is the same era that Shrek, Monsters Inc. and Shenmue the movie came out. Blue Moon Studio Inc. is seemingly a much smaller company than any of those big names too. So small we went down several rabbit holes trying to find any information to do with this anime. Compared to its contemporaries, the modelling of Fei Fei might not be quite up to the same standard, but the compositing is very impressive. The mixed media short has such a sense of place compared to the fully 3D ones. It's slow, somber, and artistically made, fitting the narrative of Fei Fei looking for her sister. Very poignant. Basically what I'm saying is the art direction is really good. Also, one Amazon description refers to Fei Fei as looking for a lover, not a sister. I assumed a sister because the two are very similar in some of the 2D shots, and I swear I heard her say Nesan at one point. But we didn't watch it with subtitles, so maybe I'm wrong and Fei Fei's type is just herself.
Fei Fei was a somewhat core feature in the history of virtual idols, and went on to inspire a lot of people to buy Shade 3D, so good job Fei Fei. Her final project seems to have been this 2006 pachinko machine. Sadly, she died at the age of 7 after being taken out back and shot by Hatsune Miku.
Hi!
Lupin III Alctraz Connection is one of many movies in the Lupin franchise. Instead of joining a long-running narrative, most parts of Lupin can be enjoyed on their own as self-contained stories. You might not get any character development for the titular Lupin, but you will have a fun time. This is one of those times. In this way, Lupin characters are more archetypes or stock characters, so once you know what their deal is, a lot of the heavy lifting of characterization is done for the OVA. Lupin is a wacky guy who values fun over money. Goemon is a diligent samurai and easily exploitable by women. Jigen is a guarded but loyal marksman. Fujiko is a woman. You get the gist. Because of this, a lot of the OVAs are not based on Monkey Punch's manga and can be picked up by any number of writers and directors looking to play with the Lupin formula. Hiroshi Kashiwabara has written the scripts or screenplays for over a dozen Lupin shows, as well as a handful of Detective Conan episodes, and also Golgo 13, all very similar in vibe. The director Hideki Tonokatsu has worked on anything from Bullbuster to Classroom of the Elite to Spice and Wolf, and also Golgo 13. This OVA has a subbed American English release, but an Italian dub, and also uses police corruption as a plot point, in an almost self-evident sort of way, which is an interesting indictment of the American police force circa 2001. As with anything made in 2001, I can't help but wonder how 9/11 affected this production. The Japanese VHS came out in October 2001, and the American release June of 2016. The Italian release was in 2005, approximately, if this 20-year-old Italian DVD website is to be believed. Do I have any proof that 9/11 would have set back an American release? No. However, considering a core part of the plot is about a conspiracy on American soil, with shady underground bunkers and the Kennedys being a secret cabal fighting an evil society of criminals who are using Alcatraz as a front for an idealistic subterranean suburban crime paradise... maybe? Also, this seems to be an original conspiracy, and not based on a pre-existing one, which is cool. It also pulls in enough truth for that sweet spot between fact and insane ramblings. Alcatraz was ridiculously expensive to run, so why keep it going? Well, because all these criminals are using it as a retirement home and funneling money into it. Fun times.
Guyver Out of Control is the 1986 adaptation of Takeya Yoshiki's manga Bio Booster Armor Guyver. There have been quite a lot of adaptations, most recently a full series in 2005, but the one we watched was the first. It roughly adapts the first volume of the manga. Guyver itself follows Sho, who accidentally bonds with a piece of alien tech called Bio Booster Armor. Imagine Power Rangers, but the suit is alive and combines with Sho in a Cronenbergian fashion. The concept of a bionic or living suit of armor isn't uncommon nowadays, but this really is the grossest version of this concept I've seen, especially in the live action, but that is a separate video. This incarnation begins with Sho and his not-quite-girlfriend Mizuki witnessing something they absolutely shouldn't have before Sho finds the Guyver unit and is forcefully transformed. It's actually pretty gross. The Zoonoids are appropriately creepy, and the fights are much more violent than I was expecting. Because it was the 80s, this OVA has the main antagonist to Sho and rival Guyver user be the most sexualized woman of all the OVAs we watched. You get to enjoy Valkyria exercising in skimpy clothes, shower, and transform. The transformation in particular taking the living suit of armor concept in a more tentacular direction. The decision to change two male characters for female ones is also a choice, with Valkyria being an OVA original character and Mizuki taking a role from Sho's male best friend. It's a little under an hour, and it feels like it was intended to be much longer with some erratic pacing and odd choices aside from the tentacles. As well as fighting to rescue Mizuki, who gets kidnapped, a lot of runtime is dedicated to Sho's emotions, having been thrust into the role of hero without his consent. It's quite melancholy in that way. In one scene he runs away from home, journeying through Japanese forests, cornfields, and deserts. Another interesting choice. The OVA ends with Sho accepting his fate, but abandoning all those he loved to pursue his new life. Unlike Appleseed, I didn't find myself wanting to read the source material, so in a way I could say that it's a slightly unsuccessful adaptation. There is fun to be had with Guyver out of control, but you have to be the sort of person who enjoys the gore and the weird shit. The director, Hiroshi Watanabe, also went on to direct the finale of Sakura Trick and 3 different Hetalia anime, so he's got game.
Wikipedia, Angel's Egg is described as a Japanese animated experimental post-apocalyptic science fantasy OVA. And yeah, that sounds about right. The film was a collaboration between Mamoru Oshii and Yoshitaka Amano, the former bringing his signature directing skills and the latter his art style and general tone and atmosphere. The visuals are stunning and very distinctly Amano, which is fascinating as initially the film had been planned by just Oshii as a Lupin III film. Amano was a potential part of that film, but as it was never made, he never was. Imagine being a fly on the wall as they converted happy-go-lucky Lupin into the melancholy dreamscape that is Angel's Egg. Only a few elements of that Lupin script made it into Angel's Egg, which is not hard considering it's a sparse movie. It has very little dialogue and leaves you sitting in the world, observing each movement in the barren, cluttered landscape. The buildings seem to have been pulled from 19th century France, but where they are now is left up to the viewer. The 71-minute runtime holds within it around 660 words or so, barely 150 unique words in total, and neither Angel or Egg is the most said one. For context, this entire section of our video on Angel's Egg contains 686 words. Here is the entire script as a word cloud, which is an equally avant-garde way to experience the movie outside of just watching the movie. The word angel does not appear at all, which could be a fascinating thing to analyze, but maybe we'll do that later in another video with more time devoted to it. 5 eggs, but 9 birds to look after them, and a few dozen loose, lonely jumbles of words that barely add context to the beautiful imagery they reside in. Equally, you could see them as pins holding up the fabric of the OVA, with the drapes in between flowing differently for each person on each watch. There is texture to Angel's Egg in the loose lines of hair and the rough fibre of paper. It is somehow both a product, so of its medium, yet so deep you can barely see it as anything except the world it wishes to show you. Any synopsis of this film is a single bare sentence, or maybe 2, that describes an approximation of what events happen, yet summarizes nothing at all. The OVA was highly praised on release, but a commercial failure, and left Oshii struggling to get any directorial work for a few years after. One critic of the time was Hayao Miyazaki, who worried it was too personal, and another was Oshii's own mother, who thought it was the end of his career. But much like a lot of avant-garde projects, it's now considerably more appreciated in hindsight, and even got a theatrical re-release in 2025 for its 40th anniversary. This included a dub into English, which we did not watch, only in part because we filmed that episode of OVA Hell about a week before it was available, and mostly in part to capture what makes OVAs so appealing. That being exposure to a whole world of stories that are so overtly not made with you in mind that you have to scrounge for a text file to have printed out while you watch. Well, okay, maybe just official subs would do, but that was some people's experience of Angel's Egg, and I am a little jealous of them. There's a lot to read into Angel's Egg, from the historical to the religious to the emotional imagery and symbolism. On the OVA Hell episode, we spent ages discussing the meaning of the story because so much is left up to your interpretation. There is so much space between each and every word that you can roll them about in your head until they become smooth little pebbles before the next word is even thought of. We of course have our theories, but I feel it would be better to let you experience it on your own.
I'm home.
Tokyo Godfathers is my favourite Christmas movie. It truly embodies the spirit of the holiday. It took me so long to get the other, smarter half of this channel to watch it. I think she got some sick twisted joy out of not watching it, but finally, I got her. Was it good or was it good? I'll say it was good.
It was good.
Damn right. Tokyo Godfathers is a 2003 Satoshi Kon and Keiko Nobumoto film. Not quite an OVA because it was released in cinemas, but it's so good we watched it anyway. Satoshi Kon is pretty well known, but Keiko Nobumoto should be. Not only was she the mangaka for Wolf's Rain, she also wrote for basically every Shinichiro Watanabe anime. Everything from Cowboy Bebop to Carol and Tuesday to one of my favourite anime, Space Dandy. But back to Tokyo Godfathers. It is the night before Christmas. Christmas Eve, as some might say. The snow is falling, and song is in the air. Hana, Miyuki, and Gin, our protagonists, already struggling to survive, hear the cry of an abandoned baby, setting the plot machinations in motion. If we summed up the events that followed, it probably wouldn't weaken the emotional journey that these four go on, but this isn't the channel for plot summaries anyway. If a picture can tell 1,000 words, a video can probably tell 1,000,000. And that video isn't this video. It's a 360p rip of Tokyo Godfathers on VHS on the Internet Archive. Even today, over 20 years later, watching a movie starring homeless protagonists is unique. The film does an incredible job humanizing them and other quote-unquote undesirables. The Yakuza, LGBT people, foreigners, the homeless, they're all viewed the same by society, but the movie views them with compassion and dignity. All the characters want to do is return a lost baby to its family. What gets in the way is the city they live in. Any extended time they spend around the general public ends with them being chased away. In one scene they manage to make it onto a train, but unfortunately they smell and they have to endure the other passengers looking at them with disgust and covering their noses. It's a scene most people can relate to one side of, but not so much the other. The film puts you in the shoes of people othered in the world and asks you to be kind. I love it for that. That sense of injustice is something that really stays with you afterwards. There was definitely an attempt to humanize Gin, Hana, and Miyuki, and that includes them having negative traits as well as positive ones. The characters being homeless is also used to explore the loss of family in different ways, and how even in the worst situations, those relationships can be rebuilt. Mundane miracles are a core theme of Tokyo Godfathers. It's chaotic and coincidental, but very human and down to earth despite that. No one step is too out there, but in succession they become magic. Given the time it's set, there's something very biblical about their journey. Although the film's actual relationship with Christianity is more on the side of criticism than anything. The film that inspired Tokyo Godfathers, Three Godfathers, was itself an adaptation of a 1913 short story, The Three Godfathers by Peter B. Kine, which reimagined the three wise men as bank robbers who inadvertently end up as godfathers to a baby. The 1948 film imagines them as cattle rustlers in the Wild West, but Tokyo Godfathers imagines not criminals, but a different sort of bottom of society, although Miyuki did stab that guy. It's also incredibly funny. The comedic timing is absolutely on point. It's a lot like Blues Brothers. The ending is a series of insane coincidences that make for edge-of-your-seat entertainment. It's great. If you haven't seen it, then you have to watch it. Unlike the next OVA on our list, that might require some more convincing.
No, it's not here, nor here. Oh!
It's the cake that bounces back, but is so luscious and heavenly soft. Packed full of taste and flavor, it's Bailey's Cake Mix.
Superbound Bailey's Cake Mix.
If an OVA's job is to sell you on a manga, then Cipher the video really won in wanting me to read Cipher the book. Set in America, the entire OVA is in English, with American pop songs making up the soundtrack. I would recommend almost anyone watch Cipher the video, preferably with an alcoholic beverage in one hand and a loved one in the other. But when it comes down to articulating that, I get tongue-tied. As with so many of these OVAs, it's about the experience. We watched Cipher the video the first time by clicking random on a website, and immediately felt drawn to its short runtime and avant-garde tag. And avant-garde it was. Somewhere between a music video and a behind the scenes of a movie, cut in with press tour footage and whatever else. In 25 minutes, it implies a world so much larger than what we see. This is because it covers about 6 volumes worth of manga, pulling tiny glimpses of a much more coherent story. Aside from being an advert for the manga which was still running at the time, it also acts as a supplemental piece for pre-existing fans, taking a very fun angle on being an adaptation. It's vague enough to be fun with or without context, which makes it a surprisingly competent watch. The original VHS also came with a 15-minute long making-of documentary, which plays out as a fictional version voiced by Cipher, the character, despite it being live action. Actually, let's jump back to that. So in the OVA, they say the manga was ongoing, but according to Wikipedia, every single volume came out in 1985. Strange. So I of course did what any normal and sane person would do. I created a Wikipedia account, found rips of all 12 volumes of Cipher, downloaded them, checked each for the correct publishing date, and then updated them directly on Wikipedia. Now that little error is sorted, let's continue. Oh, but wait. The English volumes are also listed in the space of a year. Okay, now it's all good. Also, the English versions were slightly condensed down into 11 volumes instead of 12. No idea why, and if I do any more tangent research, this video won't make it out on time. What have we learnt from this? Well, that despite Wikipedia being a great first step, you should always double check your sources. We've also learnt that part of that is making sure you understand the wider context of what your research entails. Because no way is an English run of a manga series getting 4 volumes in a month, even if they're 15 years late. Where was I going with this? Watch Cipher the video, it's like 25 minutes, and what else would you use that time for? Updating Wikipedia pages about 1980s manga?
John says he wants to take you back. Kathy.
Dog Soldier? Oh, Dog Soldier. No dogs in this one, just a knockoff Rambo. This OVA is an adaptation of Suwawatari Tetsuya's manga of the same name. The adaptation was made by Animate Film, the same studio who worked on Guyver actually. It has a lot of the same issues too, slimming down the plot to fit a presumably tight budget. Dog Soldier is, however, their worst rated production, and the studio has seemingly vanished, with the brand Animate now working mostly in merchandise and physical stores across Japan. A lot of Animate Films OVAs were co-produced by another studio, and in Dog Soldier's case it's JC Staff, who still exist, but for whom Dog Soldier is also their worst rated production, out of 452. But what is an Dog Soldier? Dog Soldier stars Hiba, also known as John Kyosuke and also known by us as John Dog Soldier. He's an ex-soldier who gets roped back into work after his childhood friend
Kathy
steals the cure for AIDS from the American government and then is promptly kidnapped for it. The rest of the story follows Mr. Dog Soldier tracking down and attempting to save Catherine from a man who turns out to be their missing childhood friend. My main criticism here is that it tries to do far too much with its limited runtime. It's condensing too many different elements in an attempt to make a full narrative. Anime Rambo on paper feels like it should be really entertaining, but unfortunately it's not. When talking about anime, I like being positive and looking for elements I enjoyed despite any shortcomings in other areas, like the composition and tone in Fei Fei, passion of Nora, or unique identity of Cipher. All these OVAs were made by artists. Some more strapped for time and money than others, but all equally trying their best to make something worthwhile. I feel that with Dog Soldier too, but I struggle to get past how bland and confusing it is. Part of me wants to read the manga to see how different they are, but it just isn't the sort of story I care enough about to torture myself with, even if it's only 21 chapters. However, from a brief skim, it seems like the OVA plot has nothing to do with the manga plot. The manga seems to follow a series of smaller missions culminating in John confronting what war does to people, but ultimately returning to living in squalor. Chapter 3 has the most similarities, with John hunting down a bacterial weapon, encountering an old friend, and it being set in a jungle temple. However, there is no friendship triangle and no cure for AIDS. The manga ended in 1996 and the OVA was released in 1989, so the ending of the manga could be seen as a direct lead-in. John's landlord gets him a job at a construction site, same as the beginning of the OVA, and perhaps he just keeps getting pulled back into working for the government every few years. Or not, I don't really want to think about Dog Soldier anymore.
Are you serious? You talking ghosts? Not for me, Charlie, no way!
For April Fool's Day, we waited tentatively as co-host of the OVA Hell podcast, June, prepared something for us to enjoy. I knew there'd be a trick somewhere, but none of us knew what she had prepared for us. I breathed a sigh of relief as Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, an anime I haven't actually seen but probably should, began to play. Bit weird the subtitles were in Spanish, but no, wait, it's an All Dogs Christmas Carol? Despite my fear something else would happen, the experience of watching this OVA was far better than I expected. And yes, it is an original video animation, so it counts. More so than Tokyo Godfathers at least. I enjoyed it more than Dog Soldier, and it's much better animated than Nora, so in my books that's an absolute win. An All Dogs Christmas Carol is the final installment in the All Dogs Go to Heaven franchise, something I had never heard of before that fateful day. This one in particular is their own adaptation of A Christmas Carol, as the title indicates. I really enjoyed how the concept was twisted to fit this strange setting. I have no idea what the context is, but the dogs seem to have been sent down to Earth from heaven to thwart an evil dog. This pooch is our Scrooge. But from there, it plays out as the dogs using the plot of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol to psychologically mess with Carface and turn him away from evil. Unfortunately, Carface is backed by the devil, or the dog equivalent. Antics ensue, and everything works out okay. It's a kids film, there's a moral somewhere in all that. But what was really fun was that June wasn't done with us yet. She redrew part of an entire scene to make a throwaway gag. Literally, it was a ridiculous amount of effort and it had us all cracking up. I think the constant anxiety that at any point something would happen made for a fun social experience, but also made me pay way too close attention in case something weird happened. 10 out of 10, I recommend gaslighting your friends.
If you're the type of anime fan who generally avoids OVAs, then I hope one of these 12 sound interesting enough to give a watch yourself. Watching videos on anime is nothing like sitting down with a drink in hand and fully engaging with them. Broadening your horizons is sometimes hard, but always worth it, and that's what I love about the OVA Hell podcast. For us, it's an excuse to sit down and watch something we might never have checked out. Speaking of things you might not have checked out, after liking, subscribing, and joining our Patreon for early access to videos, work in progress videos, and monthly blog posts, you should totally go and check out the OVA Hell podcast. They're working really hard on it over there, so go show some support. Bye!